Have you been busy? It's a silly question. You seem very busy. You're always on the move.
You know, it's like everything when you work for yourself. You're always busy, but am I doing the right things and am I doing all revenue producing things? You know, I got more to do. I'm trying to be that alpha star that shines bright, not to put other people in a shadow, but to illuminate them.
Boom. Yes. Hey, you've been doing some good reading recently. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I feel better now because I relate to you. If you ask me how I'm doing, literally that sentence you said before the shining bright one, that's how I feel as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to make things happen and all that. And I've been doing this as my only source of income for 11 years almost.
Yeah.
And you have good years and you have bad years, and I've finally learned just to like myself and know it's going to work out.
This is awesome stuff. I feel better already. No, yeah, obviously we're going to talk about it in the interview, but I see it in terms of, I feel like you're actually I should say it in the interview, but you're like a speaker who does podcasting, as in like a lot of people I talk to, and I would consider myself a podcaster who does some speaking, and I want to shift the balance. So I'm real. It's going to be good to interview you and talk to you here. So
Cool. And you're interviewing me for which show?
So awaken your alpha first.
Perfect.
I thought, and that'd be like 25 minutes.
Perfect.
Then I thought we could have like a 5-minute break, maybe 10, just let it download, get a drink, glass of water, then jump back in. And then it'd be purely about your TED talk and that experience. And that'd be, so we should be, I'm sure we'll be done around the hour. And
Perfect.
Then we can jump on, and then you can lead the show, as it were, and go from there.
We can find out all about you.
Cool things entrepreneurs do. I know. That's very cool. See, me and you have got it old school. We've got actual physical, logos. I'm interview some people and they got the green screen thing going on. And I'm like, hey, I built all this. What are you doing?
A turkey flies in behind them or something. It's like, whatever.
I interviewed someone and they were on a golf course. I was like, what's going on? Right.
Do you record the video too?
I do. Again, completely honestly, I don't do a whole lot with the videos. I just like to see the person's face. But you look good, and so and yeah, there we go. But I may use it for a trailer if you say something. Well, when you say something very awesome and witty and soundbitey. So, okay. Right. Welcome this week. We've got Thom Singer on the line. Thom believes that all opportunities come from people. As a keynote speaker, he combines a robust, even if I can speak, mix of actionable content with high energy delivery style. He's the author of about 11 books on the power of business relationships, networking, presentation skills, legal marketing, entrepreneurship. It could go on and on. He's the host of the popular Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do podcast. I've been aware of Thom for a while, and I had the opportunity and honor of sitting next to him at a recent mastermind to do with podcasting. I'm very happy he's on the show. Thom, are you ready to awaken your alpha today?
I am ready. Thanks for having me.
No worries. So just spoke before the interview. I see you as a very experienced speaker MC who does podcasting as well. And a lot of people I know maybe are podcasters predominantly, and then they are trying to work on their speaking game and they dabble in it. So it's going to be really interesting today. But I mean, is there anything you'd like to add or highlight to that bio? Because I know it could go on. What are you all about at the moment?
No, it's the bio doesn't talk about the fact that, I've been married 28 years. I have two almost adult daughters. I have a 17-year-old and a 22-year-old. And, I'm just trying to learn how to like myself and have fun along the way.
I love it. And just before the interview, Thom said some things, and it made me feel very relaxed and better already because, the entrepreneurial journey is up and down. And if you listen to these interviews or see people on social media, sometimes you think it looks all shiny. But, we're all trying to improve ourselves and, like you say, be happy. I love that. So can you tell us a brief bit about your origins? Where are you originally from? Where are you speaking to us from today?
So I grew up in the suburbs of Los Angeles, California. I went to college in San Diego. And then for some reason, I left San Diego. I've never figured out what was going on. I think it was the fact that it was my college town and I had to get out.
Yeah, to grow up.
I moved to the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of years later, I got offered a job in Austin, Texas in 1991. And my girlfriend I'd been dating for about 4 or 5 months also got offered a job in Austin, totally different companies, totally different. I said, let's do this. And she said, "Are you asking me to marry you?" And I said, "No, I'm asking you to move to Texas for like 3 years." And we did. We got engaged soon after getting to Texas. We got married. We've lived here 28 years. And so Austin, Texas, I've lived in Austin, Texas longer than I've lived anywhere else.
Yeah. And you've been a professional speaker for about 11 years. Actually, I'm going to reverse it a little bit. Was there kind of like an awakening moment where you transitioned and you felt like, I'm going to go for this? And there could have been several in your life, but is anything spring to mind when I asked that question?
So there's a couple of pieces to that. One is I was a sales and marketing person, and I was successful in sales. I transitioned over to marketing. I had a really successful career for about 6 years as a marketing director for a law firm, a bank, and a consulting firm. And then when you're in sales and marketing, you tend to go to a lot of conferences. And I would either as a sponsor and you've got a booth, or as just an attendee, and I would watch these keynote speakers. And I can remember sitting in the audience thinking, wow, she or he, they have a better job than I do. And so I would talk to them. How do you get to do what you do? And some of them were famous, and they were a celebrity of some sort who became a speaker. But a lot of them were people who just had a message and were talented in doing that. And I kept thinking, God, I would rather do that than what I'm doing. And so I was pretty involved with the Toastmasters Club. And in 2002, I mean, long before I did this, I ended up placing in the top 18 people in the world in the international Toastmasters competition.
Wow.
And people ask me, where do you come up with 18 in the world? People kind of roll their eyes. Well, there's a mathematical way to this. There were 9 finalists who went to the finals, right?
Yeah.
Somebody won that. But each one of those finalists, they competed in a semi-final, like the 5th round. The Toastmasters, it starts at your club and you go to area and you go to division, etc. And you work up to the regionals. I was the runner-up at the regional contest. So I was number 2 to one of the 9 people. So I look at that I was the top 18 in the world. And the guy who beat me and went to the finals, he won the whole thing. So really, I could have been number 2. Who knows?
Yeah.
But
I like the 18 thing, because a lot of times people say, oh, top 10 or top 100, but the 18 is very specific. So I just assume, oh, there must be a reason behind that.
There was a reason. So around that time, I started thinking, wow, I obviously have at least a little bit of a skill to be able to do this. So I spent the next 7 years while I was working in marketing. I spent the next 7 years, I wrote a book, and I took every speaking opportunity at every Rotary Club that I could. And I just fine-tuned the skill. And then in 2009, during the bottom of the recession, April 1st, 2009, I got laid off in a mass layoff at a company I was at.
Yeah.
And there were no marketing jobs in the services industry. All of my friends were getting laid off. And so I came home and said, I'm going to become a professional speaker. And I just went out and did it starting that day.
Wow. So in that moment, obviously it's the situation has been put on you, but you've been prepping. Was there elements of relief, or were you excited, or were you just in pure, dread mode and just back up against the wall kind of scenario?
Yes. I mean, all of the above, right? I mean, and I think I've never stopped. I think I've been excited. I've been scared. I've been driven. I've been whimpering in a corner, curled up in a ball. I think that being an entrepreneur brings you all of that. And so, when I think of the title of your show, Awaken Your Alpha, the reality is that, even when you're being an alpha, sometimes you pull the covers over your head and whimper like a baby.
Yeah. And I always say it's something, it's like, for me, it's like a personal reminder every day. You've got to do it every day. You can't just, say, oh, I did it last week. I woke up my alpha, and then just like.
Well, but it's easy to get distracted, right? I mean, over the past, it's now been 10 and a half, almost 11 years. Over that time, I've had really good years that have been like the highest earning I've ever had. And I've had some years that have kicked me in the teeth. And you'd think, oh, this was totally linear. It just got better all the time. Well, it did for the first several years. And then I've had a couple of hiccups along the way. And you think, oh, no, the world is shifting. But the reality is that the world is shifting.
Yeah.
And I have to shift my topic. I have to shift my ability. I have to get better on stage. Everybody now, when I first started in this business, if I went onto LinkedIn and looked for people who were speakers in like the area I live in Austin, the people who showed up were all people I knew were actively out there pursuing speaking.
Yeah.
Now everyone puts it on their LinkedIn profile. They call themselves a conference speaker, a content speaker, whatever. And I talked to a friend of mine and I said, I didn't know you spoke. And he goes, well, I did once. And I'm like, why is it like front and center on your bio? And he goes, oh, my company hired this PR person. And they made all of us put it in our bio because it makes us smarter because we say we're a speaker. So I always ask people, how many times did you deliver a speech where you were invited? You don't even have to be paid.
Yeah.
You were not inside your company where you planned it, where an exterior person invited you in the last year. And I'm amazed at how many people say 2. This year I will give 60 presentations. Now some of those are at the same conference. I can do a keynote and 2 breakouts. That's 3 different presentations, but I'll give over 60 presentations this year to individual audiences where someone else has invited me to put me on that stage. And so I really strive every year to make sure I have that level of capacity, because it helps me get better. Speaking begets speaking, and it raises my skills.
And it's interesting, the point you really touched on something there, because like you said, everyone has that, a lot of people have that speaker attached to their bio. And so that's why I had to sort of clarify. It's like, you are a speaker, who does some podcasts on the side. And there is a big difference. And it's kind of like, people see speaker on your bio sometimes when they meet, and then when they talk, they might probably go, oh, you are a speaker kind of thing. You are a professional.
Well, let me tell you a funny story. I was at this conference where you and I met. I was at the first one, and I was sitting there and I was talking to another podcaster, and he said, so how do you make your living? And I said, I'm a professional speaker. And he goes, no, but I mean, he goes, you live in a nice house. He goes, you have kids. How do you pay the mortgage? Where does the money come from for that? And I said, I'm a professional speaker. And he goes, no, but he goes, I'm talking about, like, how do you feed your family? How do you make your income? And I said it again, and I looked at him, and I said, I give a speech and they give me a check. And he looked me dead in the eye and he said, well, that model is dead. And I'm like, my answer was, for God's sake, don't tell my clients.
Yeah.
And his take was that no, he literally believed, because he had gone to some other podcasters conference and they said, look, nobody gets paid to speak. You speak and you sell a course, or you speak and you sell coaching. And that's a total model of speaking. Yeah. It just doesn't happen to be where I live. I live in the corporate and association market. They don't want me to sell anything. My clients, I mean, I have things I could sell, but my clients prefer that I just give up and give a speech where people go, wow, that was my experience for the morning.
Yeah. This is my Yoda question. Who helped awaken your speaking alpha? Just to give it into a little bit more context. I'm sure there's many people, whether from a distance, as in someone you aspired to in the speaking world, or just someone said the right thing at the right time for you.
So that we could do a whole podcast on the list of people who inspired me. But if I had to pick one, it would be Harvey McKay. And Harvey was, and still is, an active speaker in the business. But what I liked about Harvey was he wasn't famous and became a speaker. He became famous through being a speaker and an author. Yeah. And I saw him speak several times back in the 90s. He was probably the most prolific professional speaker in the business circuit. And I saw him at 3 or 4 conferences, and I wrote him a letter one day. I was kind of stuck in my career, and I wrote him a letter, and he wrote me back. This is pre-internet. This is early 90s. Wow. And then he came to Austin to speak about the time I was maybe in the early 2000s, when I was looking to maybe be a speaker. And I wrote him, and he said he needed a driver that day to get him around to a couple of appointments. So I got to have him in my car. I got to take him to lunch, and he really spelled out for me how someone could go about building a career as a professional speaker who wasn't like famous for something out there in the outside. And he spelled it. I remember being in my car, and he spelled it out for me. And I just spent the next several years kind of, putting the pieces together.
Well, I'd be silly if I didn't ask now, what are some of the key pieces either that you've sort of distilled yourself now, or that he sort of shared with you that kind of like really connected with you?
Well, one of the things that, I remember, and I don't remember if this was him directly, but one of the things people told me is that you have to be good. And the problem is that most people who call themselves a speaker or who have given a few speeches think they're very good. And I know where this came from. This came from a guy named Jim Pancero. And Jim is a sales expert. He's been a speaker for over 3 decades. And Jim became a mentor to me when I first joined the National Speakers Association. I met Jim at the bar at the hotel. And to this day, he's someone I call whenever, I'm up against the wall. Because number one, he's a sales expert. And number two, he's just a good man who's been a great mentor to me. And Jim said to me early, I don't think I was a professional yet. I think I had just joined and was still dreaming about it. I don't think I'd gone full time. Jim said to me, what do you want someone to say to you when you come off stage? And I said, I want them to say, that was great. That was moving. Best speaker of the conference. And he looked me dead in the eye and he said, no, you don't. And I'm like, yeah, I have an ego. Yes, I do. And he said, no, you don't, because there's no way to know if you're good if they say you're good. And I'm like, I don't understand. And he gave me a great example. So play along with me on this, Adam.
Mhm.
Let's say that you're at a conference and the speaker, she or he, they're just okay.
Yeah.
When they say in conclusion, you're thinking that's about right. Now you're at the cocktail party afterwards and you go to grab a piece of shrimp and the other person next to you goes to grab a piece of shrimp. And that's always funny. You make eye contact and you laugh because you tried to grab the same shrimp tail and you look at each other and it's the speaker and you look around and nobody else is anywhere near you. What do you say to her or him?
Good speech.
Absolutely. You look
Great
at them and
speech. I really liked your speech.
that's the
And then you
answer
get out.
every time is great speech. Because we live in a polite society. You're not going to look her in the eye and say, oh my God, you were highly mediocre. That speech, you really need some work. You're not going to do that because we live in a polite society. So you would look at her as everyone does and says, great speech. And so Jim said, you can't go off of people telling you your speech was good because we live in a polite society. And I told this story one time and a woman said to me, well, I am brutally honest. I would never say great speech unless it was great. And I said, what would you say? And she goes, I would look at them and I'd find that little part and I'd say, I loved that part of your speech about your sister. And I said, great. Do you know what that speaker hears? Great speech.
Yep.
So everybody thinks that they're really good. And so I asked Jim, I said, well what is it that I want? He goes, you want them to say a derivative of what else can you do for me? And I said, I don't understand. And he said, if they come up and they say, do you have a book I can buy? Do you have a podcast I can listen to? Well, of course, he didn't say that,
Yeah.
12 years ago. But do you do coaching? Would that speech work for a group of lawyers? Because I work for a law firm. Can you morph that speech to do this? Or even if they say, can I buy you a cup of coffee and pick your brain? And there's so many people in the podcasting and the speaking world who are like, I hate that expression. I want to pick your brain. I listen to these people all the time and I want to smack them. They're like, I hate these people who come up and they want free consulting. They say, I want to buy you coffee and pick your brain. It's like they think this is some huge insult. And actually what Jim taught me is that's a huge compliment. It means great speech or great podcast or
Yeah, you've done something that they want to continue the conversation or,
right. And
develop the relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Jim said, if they say something that you can easily translate to what else can you do for me, then you did a good job. And he said, if you're not hearing that, you're not a good speaker. And it was like, wow. And what I learned from that is that doing a great job on stage leads to spin-off business. And if I look at my business and I do okay, I mean, I'm not rich. I'm not one of these people making $500,000 or $1 million a year in speaking, but the family still eats and we have a great life. And I'll tell you, 90% of my speeches come from people who saw me speak or heard me on my podcast and said, we should look at him for our company's conference. And so when people call and try to book me, I say, where'd you hear about me? They say, our finance person saw you at a conference 3 years ago. That is great speech.
Awesome. Wow. So one of the topics you kind of your keynote you speak about now, and I'd be interested, like you say, it's morphed over the years, the paradox of potential. Can you tell us a little bit about that concept and how you come up with it? Because it had me hooked at the name and I love it. It's all like the Awaken Your Alpha. It really fits well. So tell us a little bit about that.
So this is content that I've been doing for about a little over the last 2 years. Most of my career, I did a talk called Connecting with People in a Gadget Crazy World. And it was all about why people matter in a world where we're looking for likes, links, shares, and follows. But that topic, which you could translate it to, it's a networking kind of topic. That topic was really popular when I started during the recession because everybody was laid off, hungry for clients. So the idea of how do we really connect with people mattered. 3 years ago, when the recession sort of was officially over, it took forever for it to officially really kind of twinkle out and people forget about it. But about 3 years ago, because we've been booming in our economy for the last 3.5 years, all of a sudden, while people still care about relationships, it's not something that's driving meeting planners because it's not one of the hungriest topics that people are saying is like, oh my gosh, my competitor's getting all the business because they know everybody. What do I do? Now people are looking at different topics. And so I couldn't sustain my business with that topic. Although it's still a large portion of it, I needed something else. So I started a research project to find out where people were coming up short. I looked at my own career, my own life, a lot of my friends. And what kept bubbling up was this idea that, gosh, I hired Becky and she had so much potential. And a year later, I had to transfer her out of the company. And so I started realizing that we get excited about potential, but it's a paradox because potential does not equal results.
Yeah.
So I've interviewed 600 plus people in a survey that I've done. I've sat down with about 40 of those people one-on-one to go deeper. And I've interviewed hundreds of people on my podcast about how come some people get farther across the gap between potential and performance and other people get stuck in the middle? And so this whole talk is for individuals and teams about how do we actually get focused on turning that potential into performance. And it's the best work I've ever done. I'm having more fun. I'm having real impact. A CEO told me this year that I hit a reset button in his most difficult employee and just changed the way the person looked at the work they were doing. And so I love that type of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely awesome. I love it. Yeah, crossing the gap as well. It's brilliant. It's interesting to hear how you come up with it as well, and sort of what the market needs and adapting with that as well. Very cool. So if someone, and it can either be a complete beginner or someone who's maybe in a sales and marketing job, and they're listening to this and they're thinking like, I feel like Tom, like 10, 12, 15 years ago, I don't want to wait till I get laid off, or maybe the layoffs come in, or even someone who's got it kind of listed as an add-on in their bio that they're a speaker. What would you suggest they should do to actually start closing that gap to become a professional one, not just listed in their bio or someone who aspires to be a speaker?
Well, so the first thing is you've got to really tone those skills. If you haven't given 300 professional speeches, and by professional, let me rephrase that. I don't mean professional like you were paid, but if you haven't given 300 speeches, again, where you're invited to be the featured speaker, it's a big difference between your boss saying, hey, Adam, stand up and give us that report. And hey, Adam, we're inviting all of our clients in. We want you to do a 20-minute talk.
Oh yeah.
For all the clients about, XYZ topic. So if you haven't done 300, this comes from a woman named Roxanne Emmerich, and she is a legend in the speaking business. She has a training company that is, worth millions and millions of dollars. She has really built a career that everybody can look at and go, wow, Roxanne Emmerich, she's all that in a bag of chips. When I first started, and again, this is like 12 years ago, she was on the cover of Speaker magazine. Now, that is just proof that there is a magazine for everybody. But one of the things that was in that speech or in that article was she said that if you haven't given 300 speeches, you're never going to be great. Somewhere, it's kind of like the 10,000 hour rule, right? Somewhere around 300 speeches that you've given to legit audiences, you will cross a threshold. And I read that and I'd given like 60, I was like, wow, I'll never get to 300. And she was right. I don't know if it was exactly the day I gave number 300. Obviously it wasn't, but somewhere around that bar, I started to be able to handle anything that happened. And about that time, I was given a big speech to like 600 realtors, and the power went out in the hotel. Now the room had windows, so we weren't in the dark, but PowerPoint disappeared, amplification disappeared. Nobody knew what to do. I just said, okay, let's keep going. I ran to the middle of the room and I just talked really loud. Maybe it wasn't 600, maybe it was 300 people, but it was enough. People could still hear me. And I completed the speech. And right as I was about to wrap up, the lights came up and the power came back on. My microphone popped back on. I jumped back up on stage and I just stood there for like 2 beats. And I looked at the audience and I said, a great speaker illuminates their audience. And the whole room busted up. And afterwards, people were like, do you have a line for everything that happens? Like if someone drops a tray or whatever. And I said, no. And they go, that was too funny. That was just perfect. And I said, I couldn't have done that 300 speeches ago. But because I have this many, I've got my chops, I kind of trust myself now on stage. So you learn the basics and then you throw it away and let your personality come out and just go. And now that I'm, pushing in on 1,000 speeches, it's an entirely different level as well. You could call me today and say, we have a speech downtown at the convention center. There's 4,000 people and the speaker missed his plane. And I could be there in 15 minutes without a PowerPoint and get up and give an hour keynote. I couldn't have done that 900 speeches ago. So it's a learn. So my answer to your question is get out there and speak. Stephen King said one time, if you want to be a writer, sit down and write. Don't worry if it's good. Don't worry if it sells. Writers write. I take that and I say speakers speak. Get out there and speak for free at every Rotary Club, Young Men's Business League, Young Women's Alliance, every organization that you can, and get out there and tell your story. Because if you haven't done it 300 times, you're not world class.
I completely relate to when you're talking about the speaking and speaking and 300 times and plus and going through that and getting dropped in it. Because in the teaching world, I taught for 10 years and I always see when things go really wrong like that, it's an opportunity to show how good you are at what it is you're doing. And, like the fact that all your lights went down and that happened, that potentially more memorable speech for the people who are there, and you obviously got you a chance to show, you know, what you can really do on top of if it's all going smoothly, which is yeah, very interesting. Okay. Oh, what is your take? Because I know you're heavily involved with sort of National Speakers Association and organising, like you mentioned, Toastmasters. So someone who's had nothing to do with that side of it, and they're maybe they're going out, they're being active, they're doing talk. What is your thoughts around that? Because I know you're involved with that. When I spoke to you around the fire, and you were like, you mark people's speeches and you're involved in that. So I'm interested to hear your side from coming into it and then being involved with it.
So those two organizations, I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for Toastmasters, it wasn't for the National Speakers Association, but they're different. Toastmasters teaches you the basics of how to give a speech. They have a basic manual and advanced manuals, and you learn things like vocal variety. You learn things about how to pause. You learn about things like how to use your hands. You learn how to tell a story. And throughout, like the advice that actually came from Harvey Mackay back 20 some odd years ago that he gave in one of his books was join a Toastmasters club and participate every week for a year, and you'll have a better career. It wasn't about becoming a speaker. It was about being able to just be able to think on your feet and have confidence when your boss does call on you and say, Adam, why don't you stand up in this meeting right now and tell us about the project you're working on? And I did that, and I got good at it, and it helped me in my sales and marketing job. So Toastmasters taught me the rules. Then I threw all the rules out, and I just let my personality and the way I talk. Recently, I had a friend from college in an audience. I spoke to a group of mortgage brokers, and I haven't kept in touch with this guy. He was in my fraternity, but we weren't like buddies. And he ends up, his company brings me in to talk to 900 salespeople, and he doesn't know I'm going to be there. I don't know he's going to be there. And afterwards, he shows me his phone, and he was texting all of our mutual friends going, oh my God, Tom is our keynote speaker at my sales meeting. And one of our friends said, is he any good? And this guy, Gary, responded back, he is good, and he's just the same guy you would sit and have a beer with. And I said, that's the best compliment I've ever gotten. That my style on the stage was the same way I'd be in the bar if I was telling a story. So that's kind of a piece of that is Toastmasters teaches you the rules. When I got involved with the National Speakers Association, two other things happened. They taught me the business of being a professional speaker, because it's not one thing. From the outside looking in, we see Tony Robbins, we see Harvey Mackay, we see whoever. That's not the way it is for you or me, because we're not those people. We're not famous. They grew up in the business 30, 40 years ago. It was a different game. You can't copy that. So National Speakers Association has conferences that, you know, you can go to all kinds of things that teaches you how to do marketing, how to do business, how to do social media. So you can learn the businessy pieces of being a professional speaker. But more importantly, is I met some of the best friends I've ever had in my life. I mean, if you ask me who the 10 best friends in my life were, 5 or 6 of them have come about in the last decade from people who I've met through this organization. And what happens is when you get around people who are doing the business, you really learn the business. Because again, from the outside, the speaking business looks like one thing. From the inside, there's 10 different paths you can take as a speaker. Those people who speak at conferences where they're selling coaching, that's a legit way. They make a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's not the world I live in. It's a different business. We both say, oh, I'm a speaker. Well, but we make our money very different, drastically differently. So getting around and making friends and having peers and a support group and a mastermind group with people inside the National Speakers Association, I don't know how a non-famous person who's coming up, who didn't get famous and drop in, I don't know how you do it alone. So for me, the National Speakers Association was the number one thing. If somebody wants to be a speaker and they're not willing to invest 2-3 years of joining, paying, because it costs money, attending, and making friends with people in that, I don't know if you're committed to the industry, because that's the only way I could do it. But there's other ways to do it. You don't have to do it my way. That was the way I did it.
Awesome. And I really like, really like where you touched on you're the same guy on the stage as off the stage, because there's always been that disconnect. If I see someone speak and then it's just like a morph, they get off stage and then they just change completely. And so I've always really liked the speakers, maybe you're talking to them before and then they're like, oh, and then they go on, do their thing. And it is like the same person you were just speaking to, vice versa. And so when there is a big change, it's like, is there something there? Or are they not, you know, confident, or what are they hiding to not be themselves on stage? Obviously, you know, it's always been something that I really appreciate what you said there. Okay, so we're going to start to wrap this up with the alpha round. I like to start that off with easy. I like to start that off with, is there a particular quote that really is either a favorite quote or one that really sums up your approach to how you like to live your life? Is there anything that jumps to mind?
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind, I'll just go with it. It's a quote that actually comes from my dad. And he passed away about 6 years ago at the age of 99. He had a pretty good run.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was older when I was born. My dad was 52 years old.
I remember you telling me about you and your brothers, and having you were the younger.
My brothers were all teenagers, just 10 to 14 when I was born. So I was like a surprise.
Yeah.
But my dad always said, be slow to anger and fast to forgive. And he said that in his wise life of like, I don't even remember my dad until he's 60, right? I mean, I don't have memories much before 7 or 8 years old. I mean, I do have some, but like the wisdom of conversations with my dad, he's over 60 by the time he starts telling me these things. And he said that in his whole life, people who were fast to get angry and hold grudges were the ones who, had the worst life. And the people who were like, fast, slow to anger and fast, be slow to anger and fast to forgive, is the best quote.
Awesome. Is there a particular resource in your professional life that you use that you think is a good recommendation, either in, if it's not slightly different, maybe in the way you use it? And I know you talked about the Speakers Association things, but is there something you do in your, either your scheduling or just in running your speaker business?
Again, I'm going to go back to National Speakers Association. I think all opportunity, because you said it and you triggered that in my mind, all opportunities come from people. So the greatest resource that I have is people. So it's my peers in the National Speakers Association. It's former clients. It's these podcast guests that I have. It's people like you who I get to meet. All opportunities in life are going to come from people. And so we have to get away from this like, link, share, and follow mentality and get back to the human side. And so one of the things I do is I try to refer the crap out of people. I every time I step off the stage, I know two things are true. That client is going to have a meeting next year and they don't want the same keynote speaker. So I always try to tell people, let me help you vet speakers. And they don't always take me up on it.
Yeah.
But because I do that a lot of other speakers refer business to me.
And perfectly timed. You're talking of referring. Who do you recommend would be a great interview for Awaken Your Alpha podcast from your network?
Oh, wow. I mean,
you've got hundreds to pull from, but just like almost like that phrase, Awaken Your Alpha, and a name pops in or a person pops in.
The first person who pops in is Phil Jones.
Okay.
And Phil is a sales speaker. I think his website is Phil M. Jones because everybody's named Phil Jones. You might like him because he's British.
Oh, okay.
but he wrote a book called Exactly What to Say that is a runaway sales bestseller, and the guy's a total alpha.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I'll reach out to him. Cool. And in sum up, what's the best way to connect with you if someone wants to continue the conversation? Got to get that bit in.
You can find me on all the social medias, Thom Singer, THOMSINGER.com. My website is Thom Singer, Singer.com. That's the easiest way to find me. There's email, contact, phone, everything's there. And then, like I said, all the social medias.
Yeah. And what's the one question you thought I would have asked in this interview and you feel like I've missed a trick? I haven't done it. I
don't know. I think you got everything, man. I can't think of anything. You nailed it. You are truly, your alpha is wide awake.
We're talking about that 300. We're on episode like 370 something. So there we go.
I was crossed the line. You've now done 300 episodes. Of course, you're world class.